everyone. I'm here today again for another Freedom to Feel conversation with Luisa Elena Kolker. And hopefully I got her name correctly. We've been practicing off record. So she is an energy seer, shamanic teacher and practitioner, licensed psychotherapist, and poet of Mexican and Russian Jewish descent. She's also the author of The Tearing Apart. That's her book. It's on Amazon now too. So this is my introduction of you, Luisa. But I usually ask my guests that opening question of who they are in their own words. And I love listening to the answers. So I'll ask you today as well. Who is Luisa?
Hi, Valeria. Well, I will give you as good an answer as I can. I've heard you
Yeah.
ask other guests that question, and I've always thought, how do you answer that? I will answer that by saying that I am someone who has been open to growing and changing and learning from as far back as I can remember being conscious, and that um, my identity is one that is very much predicated on not having a set defined sense of identity other than my own core of myself that I feel. So
Mm,
it's a feeling experience rather than the bio that you introduced me with. The
yeah.
way that I define or know myself is through a feeling state of that I feel is timeless.
I love that. And I did read exactly that on some of information that I had access to about you that really resonates true to me, that feeling. And you call it natural. It's something that it's always here, never left us, and it never changed. It's interesting to kind of realize that because we can't really rationalize it
Mm.
or intellectualize that feeling, right, Luisa? It's something that can only be recognized, can be seen, but I don't know what eye sees it because it's sure not the eyes, the body's eyes. So going back to that question that I actually sent it to you by email and you responded, I would love to hear from you today as well. This speaking of feelings, what is would you say that that feeling that we come to recognize is that freedom? Does it give us that sense of freedom? And if it does, how can we manifest and integrate that freedom in our day-to-day human experience?
So, are you referring to the feeling that I was just saying is
Yes.
how I identify or how I know myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that is something that we all have that is natural and inherent. And then I think it gets very congested
Right.
and distorted necessarily. It's sort of like the necessary wound of
Mm,
being human. It's not just a wound, it's also how we cultivate a relationship ultimately with the divine is through losing that sense of connection with our natural inner selves.
right.
Yeah, so the to me that state of emotional freedom, it's not just a state, it's something that I have to cultivate and that is a relationship
Yeah.
with the sense of the divine in myself. And that means over and over again questioning
Mm,
the conditioning, questioning the messaging
yeah.
of my culture, of my family system, of religion,
Right.
of all of these things that are necessarily sort of attached to us or that become layers
Right.
on top of that essential knowing of who we really are. And that has been my lifelong work for myself personally, but also when I work with students and clients, that's my desire for all of us
Yeah.
is to be aware of the conditioning, to be aware of that. It's not we can't just make it go away.
Right.
What does that feel like versus what do I feel like when I rest back into my deepest self?
Yeah. Even the listening to you, it kind of makes us, breathe deeper in a sense of relaxing those conditioned parts of this. It's kind of, it's just beautiful. What can I say? So, how did you come to that, let's say, that path of questioning the conditionings? Is that, yeah, I would love to hear the story behind who you came to be today.
Yeah, that's a great question for anyone, for everyone.
Yeah.
I would say in my case that very early on in life, and I mean, at 6 months old, I started having non-ordinary experiences, meaning experiences with non-physical reality.
Right.
And because of that, it threw the consensual, collective perceptions of the world that was around me, of everything and everyone that was around me. I wondered, like, or I knew, not at 6 months, but certainly by the time I was a child, a little kid, I realized that not everyone was seeing
Yeah.
non-physical reality, and not everyone was having an experience of communicating with non-physical reality. And so I, in a lot of ways, felt cast out on my own. Had to figure out, how do I make sense of not perceiving the world or perceiving reality in the way that it appears that other people around me are.
Right.
So I would say isolation, feeling isolated,
Yeah.
emotionally and
Yeah.
spiritually isolated is it's a pretty rich path for feeling motivated to find out, who am I?
Right. Yeah. I can relate to that deeply. Yeah, I felt the same way. That's amazing how we get isolated, not just from those feelings within that we want to express, but also it's something that has been almost like culturally agreed upon to kind of not to talk about, not to listen to these spiritual ideas, which I really see thoughts and emotions as spiritual guides, so spiritual signs, everything. We can't see them, so they are spiritual to me. So what do you feel drives some of us to ask those deeper questions and to embark in this spiritual path or search? And some of us live their entire lives without ever questioning or actually trying to escape or pushing away those ideas. What makes us different in a way?
Well, I think loneliness is a great teacher, and it's something that is really, I think, invalidated in our modern westernized culture, that loneliness is an enemy, that
Right.
pain is an enemy,
Right.
that confusion and self-doubt are enemies. And at the beginning, earlier, you had mentioned something about, can we do this without self-doubt and without fear? And I would tell you, the first half of my life was saturated with self-doubt and with fear.
Right.
And one of the things that arose from that was a great deal of empathy for people who are in a state of self-doubt, of fear, of loneliness.
Right.
So learning to not only endure discomfort, but to be willing to meet it, to be willing to just open oneself up. And this is something that on occasion, I learned to do when I was in a state, or have been. I still do this at times. If I'm in a state of anxiety or loneliness or pain or doubt, self-doubt, I do have this practice I do sometimes. It's not very spiritual, but I will just lie on my bed and like, okay, I'm willing to feel this. Oh,
Yeah.
this feels pretty dreadful. I let it move,
Yeah.
just in the same way that we wouldn't imagine, most of us, trying to block the flow of a natural, body of water, a
Right.
river, a stream. That would seem like the most foolish thing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is something that has taken me a long time to recognize as not being dangerous, Valeria.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not dangerous to
Hmm.
feel. And
Mm.
a lot of us, especially if we have very rational or academic or intellectual backgrounds or environments, I think there is a kind of meta message that to feel is dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. And that's what it came to me as a powerful message going through these layers and layers of suffering and pain from the conditioned body and mind. I noticed that something in me was pushing away those feelings, those hard ones, the negative ones. And then when I learned to just listen to them, it's almost like it is a relationship. You're right. But not as an attachment. It's a different, from my perspective, it's a different kind of a perspective where I see them, I recognize those feelings, but there's something in me that it's not attached to them. It's just kind of it's compassionate. It wants to be there for them or with them, but it's not trying to change anything. That's interesting that I have come to realize that's not really, it's not trying to change the feelings, not gonna help even if
Right.
right, it's not changing because that's control and trying to, but and the I guess where I'm at now is how do we balance that sense of acceptance, of surrender, with the other sense of the urgent, inspired kind of urge to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great question, because on the one hand, letting recognizing that there are forces in the psyche, there are forces of the nature inside of us that are going to have weather systems,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without fighting that. Just that's why I
Right.
was saying about a riverbed or a stream. You don't to fight it keeps you attached, keeps you
Right.
in a battle, in
Right.
a confrontation.
Yes.
Now, what you just said a moment ago, where you're talking about sort of the other side of the dialectic here,
Yeah.
is something that I like to call spiritual dissatisfaction,
Yes.
being spiritually pissed off.
Yeah.
I have had my moments and like, okay, liking this,
Yeah.
and there is something that I desire.
Yeah.
I desire the flavors of life that I have not
Yeah.
yet tasted. I desire the flavors of connection and of and when I feel and express those desires, which
Yeah.
sometimes if I'm in more of a child state, I will demand,
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
have a very resilient sense of God, of the divine, which
Yeah.
is she is very tolerant of
Mm.
my emotional
Yeah.
state. So yeah, so divine or spiritual dissatisfaction is something that I think is very important,
Mm.
and in part because it's what the same fire that leads to that divine dissatisfaction, that same spark and fire,
Yeah.
also gives us the energy to constantly question,
Yeah.
is this me? Is this
Yeah.
true? Is this true for me? Am I being
Yeah.
true to myself?
Yeah. Yeah. I never heard. I never heard it that way. If I just trying to remember the term spiritual dissatisfaction, it's a funny one. I don't know why it's funny to me, but it makes sense, right? Because we are kind of we can't be sure. We cannot be 100% sure, especially when it comes from that spiritual realm, understanding, realization. It seems like we lose grip of everything, and then it becomes this flow of life being itself throughout this body, mind, and everything else that we encounter. The way I see it, everything is spiritual. There's nothing that's not. And so the satisfaction, of course, it will be everywhere as well, because this is duality, right? If we can find satisfaction, then the satisfaction will be there. That would have no way out of that. How Another question I have for you is, have you found, or has somebody asked you the question about the goal? What is the goal of this human experience? What are we looking to get? Because I have found, even within myself, not today, but I have had this idea that, oh, the reward, I'll be a good girl, very, I'll do really good in here so I can go to heaven, or I can just have peace in the afterlife. So in this moment, what is the for you, what is the goal of this life and everything that we do here, spiritually or not?
Well, it's certainly not to be a good girl.
Right. I like that.
I, because I remember in the 90s, there was a therapy training. I'm a therapist, and there was a therapy training that was called Being a Good Girl Can Kill You.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it was literally that it could physically kill you, but I think we could include that, because confining oneself to being some external notion of being good is so compressing and so
Yeah.
confining.
Yeah.
And that translates from the physical, from the emotional into the physical as well.
Right.
So, yeah, my notion of why I'm here, what this is about, is to connect more and more intimately with whatever God, goddess, source energy is in me, and to be true to whatever my particular blueprint is for living that,
Yeah.
expressing that, embodying that. Because if I leave this world without having just squeezed the juice out of life and tasted it and danced it
Yeah.
and loved it, I think that's the only thing I would probably have regret about.
Yeah.
I don't feel that I'm going to have regrets about that, though.
Oh, I love that, Luisa. That sounds really wonderful. No regrets. If I understand, so it's really expressing who you are, in a sense of with all the genetic makeup, the way being a female in this realm, and everything that has to do with. Is that really the message? Like just being ourselves, just connecting deeper.
Yes, that's part of it, but the art to the way that I endeavor to live my life
Yeah.
is to continue over and over again asking myself, is this who I am on? Am I seeing myself through the eyes of my own soul, or am I seeing myself through the eyes of people whose influence
Mm,
I absorbed early on?
yeah.
Because again, if I were to simply try to express that the influences that I absorbed from people who mostly meant very well,
Yeah.
I would not be true to what I call my fully blossomed self. I call that
Mm,
dimension. I call that
yeah.
dimension of myself that holds the original design of what
Yeah.
my particular flavor is of being human in this lifetime. I call that my
Yeah.
fully blossomed self. And
Yeah.
I don't want a blossom that is limited in a
Right.
small box. I want it to be big, and I want it to be a celebration and an experience of gratitude for, wow,
Uh,
I I get to have this experience.
yeah.
I get to have it. I don't want to waste this.
Right.
Yeah. So even if it's uncomfortable for me to
Yeah.
encounter and to challenge the external influences that have shaped me, and they have in some wonderful ways, and they have in some
Yeah.
not wonderful ways. But the point is to continue to ask myself, is this coming from my soul design, or have I just latched on to some opinions? Have I
Hmm.
latched on to um, some images
Right.
of what and who I should be?
Right. That really it resonates true to me. For the audience, I would love for you to unpack a little bit more about the soul. What is the soul in relation to the spirit? I hear different answers when it comes to the soul and the spirit. What does it? What is the difference? What is the soul specifically? And also when it comes to the feeling, it seems like it goes back to a feeling. How do we know when we are living the soul's purpose? What does it feel like? You already mentioned gratitude, but are there any other feelings within that realm?
Well, soul and spirit, and these words are just thrown around,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yes,
thrown around like confetti, at a
yes,
parade.
yeah,
And everyone has their own ideas about that. My feeling is
yeah,
spirit and spiritual simply means non-physical.
ah,
It may
yeah,
not be, so there are spiritual energies that to
yeah,
me are not very high vibration.
right,
There are spiritual energies that can be manipulative.
yeah,
Soul is something else. Soul is
mm,
kind of the North Star. It is one's own true loyalty
ah,
to something that is God given, goddess given, source generated.
mm,
So soul can express through the physical, it can express through one's spirituality. But the people who, to me, who have access, who've developed an intimate relationship with their own souls
yeah,
are the people who are most spontaneous. Their spirituality is no big deal.
right,
It is they are relaxed and natural, spontaneous,
yeah,
and not really concerned with being a good girl or a good boy, a good
mm, mm,
person.
mm,
They are in touch with their inherent goodness,
mm,
their inherent
mm,
goodness.
mm,
And uh, I remember when my
yeah.
son was 4 years old, which was a long time ago. But I remember my son coming up to me and saying, "Mom, I've figured something out." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "I'm good for nothing."
Oh
Okay.
my God.
"I'm good for," I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I don't. There's nothing I have to do to be good. I'm good. I'm just good."
Mm,
Wow.
mm, yeah,
And I will say it has taken me much of my adult life to accept that it's okay. It's more than okay to to touch into and relax into a kind of inherent goodness in myself, because I used to feel
right.
like surely I'm not good enough to be good,
Mm, right,
you
right.
know.
Yeah, yeah. That's a very insightful and important message. Yes, right. Because when you speak of the soul, when I hear the name, what comes to me is that benevolence, it's love. That's always
Mm,
the image that I see. And the
mm,
spirit, you're right, the spirit has a different color and it has yeah, the spirit's almost like it doesn't care if it is love or not. It's just the non-physical, as you said. It just doesn't really, it doesn't change. The soul it seems like it's driven by love. And that's a beautiful answer you gave. It's very clear what you said, because we do confuse them. I don't know why. And you're right. I like the confetti thing that you said. We just throw that around. True. Talk to me for a moment about your book. It's poems. You're a poet. It's just beautiful. It's The Tearing Apart. So what was the main purpose of publishing that book, Luisa?
Well, I've always written poems, even when I didn't know what I was writing was poetry. And the poems in The Tearing Apart were poems I wrote over, I think it was about a 6-year or 7-year period of time, a really difficult, challenging time of enduring or being with a lot of loneliness and self-doubt and other forms of discomfort. And so I had this manuscript. I started putting it together in 2019, just gathering and polishing and up these poems. And then, long story short, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was in Spain. I was in Ibiza, Spain, which is where I lived in the 1980s. And lockdown was much more intense there than it was in other countries, certainly than in the United States.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, am I ever going to be able to get back to the United States? It took me months. It took me 5 months to be able to come back home. And secondly, what do we mean by a pandemic here? Is it going to be like the bubonic plague where 1 out of 4 people dies, and maybe I'm going to croak in another country? And I thought, I'm going to do it now. I had already started a little small press imprint with a couple of close friends of mine who are also writers, and it's called Renegade Oracle Press. And so I just did a sharp learning curve, figured out how to create this as a book, and I put it together and I published it through the Kindle publishing app on Amazon. And I put it together and released it that same year. And I'm really glad I did.
Yes, right. Did you set an intention, and did you have a clear purpose, or it was just something that happened from the soul?
You mean for publishing it, or?
Yes, yeah, for publishing.
There was at the very beginning of the book, I dedicated, some people dedicate books to a person or to people. And I dedicated my book. I think I wrote something like, to those who have traveled a long way and are weary, I extend my hand.
Yeah.
Because I wanted, it means a lot to me to let people who are lonely or who are in pain, let them know that they're not alone, that they have kindred friends.
Yeah. I love that too. That's something else I can relate with. Even the books I have written, this podcast has all of it. It's grounded in that. It's being lonely, feeling lonely for so long. And then sadness was a very close friend of mine because of that loneliness, not feeling disconnected from people, not from that's interesting because we're not disconnected from source. We never are anyway. But the sense of trust was not there. And that's something that had to be reestablished and practiced in a way. So with that in mind, is trust for you, like at this point, trust something that it's still being practiced, or it's something that you have already, you found a home that's called trust, and now the soul sits there and everything is fine. It's always well.
Trust is real trust. Deep trust is the result of an intimate relationship with my vulnerable self. And I don't think I had that for a long time. I wanted to trust something or someone outside of me.
Right.
And I looked
Mm.
to relationships, or I looked to people. All of these things are wonderful, but it
Yeah.
was almost like I was throwing something out of my own core,
Right.
something or someone to trust. And what
Right.
I've really learned over time is I can't truly experience intimacy with myself or trust with my deepest self unless I kind of harness back,
Yeah.
retrieve all those energy fibers that I threw out like a
Yeah.
fishing line out into the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
I have to go, wait, don't go fishing out there. That's not what you're looking for, Luisa.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so trust has taken a long time. And I think
Mm.
many of us begin with trust in the outer world, trust in a parent or a religious system, trust in a society. And I think that's a very normal stage of psychological and emotional development. But I think there is a point
Yeah.
where we have to make a choice. Am I going to keep on casting myself, throwing myself out there to look for what I'm hungry for?
Right.
Or am I going to endure this loneliness, Valeria, that you and I have been talking about? Am I going to, because that is a stage, it's sort of the in between state
Yeah.
between trusting and maybe even making the outer world your higher power,
Right.
between that and bringing that relationship of intimacy inward. There's going to be an intermediate state, which is feeling lost, and which
Mm.
is feeling alone, and which is
Yeah.
feeling self-doubt. So
Yeah.
I, if someone has not experienced self-doubt, loneliness, pain, questioning their validity or their worth, then to me, they're not ready for the
Mm.
deepest kind of spiritual intimacy
Mm.
themselves.
Mm. So in a way, it takes suffering to go deeper into that trust, doesn't it? I mean, it's yeah.
Yes. Yeah, suffering or pain, there's a big new
Yeah.
age conversation about suffering versus pain, but I would say it takes encountering your humanness. It takes
Yeah.
encountering
Mm.
my vulnerable, messed up, messy,
Mm.
coloring out of the lines, bad hair day
Yeah.
humanness.
Right.
Yeah, to to
Right.
to to make that journey twice. And so,
Right.
yeah, I think it is pain. I think feeling disconnected from one's authentic core is painful.
Yeah. Very painful. Tell me about
Very
it.
painful, but a meaningful, but it can a meaning can arise from that.
Right. If yeah, if we just become open to that pain, to that suffering, whatever we are going through, that's something that keeps coming back to me as a message to be open, always to be open to everything that is happening, how it's happening, without any judgment, just being open to it. And that sometimes gets me kind of in that dance again of trust, like, oh wow, that doesn't feel right, whatever it is. And do I have to trust this? That's kind of the paradox, because I do trust that force within, that I know it's here, it's not out there. But then I also have to trust the out there, because it's a reflection of what it's here, because everything is connected, there's no separation anyway.
Valeria, there's something I want to mention based on
Yeah.
what you just said,
Yeah.
which is I think it's also important to be allowing and to make space
Yeah.
for when we feel so messed up, so damaged, so beyond repair, and for those, and to also just be with when we feel hopeless. Because, rather than telling ourselves, okay, I've got to hold on to what I believe in, I've got to connect with my soul. But I will tell you
Yeah.
that for me, there have been times, and some years ago, I had a very serious illness, and I did not feel connected with my soul. I did not feel connected with love. I did not feel this is all going to turn out fine, because sometimes in terms of what our beautiful human ego consciousness wants, sometimes an illness does not turn out the way we want.
Right.
Sometimes a
Right.
relationship does not turn out the way we want.
Right.
So to also be able to just accept and to know that there will be times when we are lost, when I am lost. I don't wish for those times.
Yes.
I am rather invested in feeling well and feeling happy. And life is huge, and that includes that there's going to be discomfort and not knowing.
Right. Yeah. See that we needed to be reminded of that. That's interesting how it sounds really inspiring to just listen to you, because it's reminding something in us that knows that, but it gets lost. We just kind of forget about it. It's a forgetting thing. That's really what it is, which is part of that dance too, isn't it, Luisa? To forget, so we can just kind of dance really well, the dance of being a human being. So there's something that you said that caught my attention. Let me see. I love the way you say, you write, that's what you wrote when I asked you the question about freedom. You said emotional freedom is the rare condition of accessing your own organic, natural feeling state, which resides beneath and beyond your conditioned mind. So this is just kind of summarizing what you already said in the beginning, but I love the way you say that too. The words I couldn't remember before, organic, right? Natural feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So that goes beyond the conditioned mind. What is beyond the mind? Because it seems like everything appears in the mind, or it's being expressed through the mind, pretty much everything. So what is beyond the mind, or the conditioned mind, Luisa? Have you had any insights into it that you can translate into words, put into words?
Well, I would distinguish between the rational intellectual mind versus the mind that is like a lake or a pond that is still and can reflect,
Yeah.
And because the mind is the pathway of all types of phenomena to be known to us. With that quote that I shared with you about the organic, natural self that's behind the conditioning, one of the things that I have learned to do, and that I teach in my workshops, and especially in my I have a class called the Embodied Mystic. One of the things I teach people to be able to do is to rest their awareness, to actually change what I call their position of perception from the front of the body to the back of the body and behind the back of the body. I became frustrated over the years with very conceptual, rational models of spirituality, because I am a show it to me, make me feel it in my body, or I'm bored. I describe myself as having a spiritual ADD. I'm sorry, I can't feel it, perceive it. If it's not me, I don't want to learn complicated systems and hierarchies, and I'm really bad with that. Okay. But what feels so much more relational to me is to notice, where am I feeling my sense of myself that is perceiving right now.
Yeah.
And so I learned, and this just it came to me, and there have been times when I have asked, and even, dare I say it, demanded
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
my helping spirits,
Yeah.
please show this to me. There's more. I know there's more. I want to know this on a visceral level of being embodied, because I have lots of time to not be in my body.
Right.
When the body dies, I had lots of time to fly around, whatever
That's
I could do. But in the body, I want to experience this with my senses. So that sense of my authentic self, that sense of the divine, that sense of just spaciousness, I experience it by resting my position of perception from the front of my body. And this is where a lot of our everyday ego engagement, sensory engagement, which is yummy, that happens here. This is the self that goes to a restaurant, looks at a menu and goes, oh, I like that and that, and what I want for dessert. That happens here. However, when it comes to perceiving and being in relationship with my deepest values, again, who am I? What is my own soul choreography?
Yeah.
That I've learned to access by actually learning how to perceive from the back of my physical body or back of my physical body.
I mean, that sounds to me, again, it goes back to trust, because the sense of embodiment. And what can I say about that? I guess from my own experience, because I had been through abuse as a child, so I was embodying everything, in a sense of feeling everything, but in a very painful, and I had, well, the body and the mind went through a lot of suffering because of the embodiment of everything. So I was not able to see, to kind of notice any of what was happening, but just feel everything and react to everything because of trauma.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this, what he's speaking about, is completely different, right, Luisa? It's not embodiment. It's not the, let's say, the unhealed embodiment of self.
Right. And Valeria, it's not the raw state of emotion in trauma, especially for a child. What's happening is such an unreal experience of overwhelm and of sometimes almost or actually unbearable pain,
Right.
that there is no capacity to rest back. We're completely in this front neural survival state of overwhelm.
Yes.
And so I make a distinction between emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
And in trauma, we are at the mercy of a raw emotional neural state.
Yeah.
And it is overwhelming, and it does activate a lot of our survival brain.
Right.
The way that I experience feelings are my capacity to become relational with those raw emotions. Because the raw emotions by themselves are almost by definition overwhelming and not relational. They're just like, sometimes I say it's like a power line that has come down in a storm, and it's sparking and it's sputtering.
Right.
You can't get close to that. Get close to something that has become disconnected from a power grid, because it is out of control and it could harm you. Right. So to me, a lot of trauma work is about later on, somewhat removed, hopefully, from the conditions of the trauma, we then develop a way to consciously be in relationship to that sputtering wire that's jumping around on the road. We find a way to skillfully reconnect it into our neural pathways and
Mm,
into our sense of self. Doesn't mean that we will ever forget what it was like to feel that scared, that out of control. But it does mean to me feeling when feeling happens with raw emotions. There can be the beginning of the development of a sense of wholeness or integration.
mm,
Yes, this happened to me and it was painful. I'm not in denial of it. And I have some kind of a natural integrative force in myself that can bring this, restore me back to a sense of safety.
right. Yeah, and that's the key word. It always goes back to me to trust again. So how can I trust my own intuition? Because I know the body and the mind has been conditioned to react so much because, yeah, you're right, it was overwhelming to have those emotions. But then, and then I went from that to more intellectualized spirituality because
Yeah.
that felt safe, really safe. Oh, okay, if I can understand here, then I'm safe, the body's safe, and I can just watch all those emotions and not do anything. And now has evolved into kind of, I would say, a kind of knowing and realization that I cannot be the experience if I can perceive them. There has to be a gap, a distance. If I can watch, like me speaking now and listening to you, who is, where is this taking place? There's something that's just kind of pays attention to all of it, but it's not really, it's not it, it's not an experience. So now has been, it became clear to me from that perspective that it's just life happening. I'm life. I don't have a life. This is just happening. And there's no reason to even know why it's happening because it's natural. Everything is life. So it's like this huge stage where everything happens, but we are none of it in a way. We are not the experience of what is happening. That's how, and I was really, really careful for this not to become an intellectual understanding. So
Mhm.
now has been fun to kind of um, reflect and contemplate throughout the day, like even now, kind of, oh my God, this is interesting. It just kind of amazes me that we can even talk about this. Like, how come? I'm aware of awareness of, that something's here still and watching everything. And I'm aware of that too, which or something in me is, whatever it is, the mind perhaps. So it has evolved to that level. And I do follow some spiritual teachings that they get very much into the point of seeing the truth, which is Advaita Vedanta. You probably have heard the Hindu. That's something that was, I don't know, it's just called whatever here in me to be in relationship with. But
Mhm.
I love the way you describe there's the difference between feelings and emotions because to me, or whatever is in here, it knows the difference as well. Yeah, there's a difference. But emotions being the responses to feelings. And feelings is just natural, organic, as you said. It's just here. It's human to have feelings. But emotions are a lot more complicated in a way. It can be. It can be.
Right. And one, if a child has her God-given birthright of feeling safe in childhood, then she may also have a parent who says to her, you're looking sad or you're being very quiet. How
Mm,
are you feeling? So the
right.
parent
Mm,
reflects the emotional state
yeah.
that is apparent, but
Yeah.
starts to
Yeah.
help the child to have what I call emotional literacy, because
Right.
we don't just go through childhood automatically being emotionally literate. We need someone to say, what's going on in you right now? You just slammed that door so hard that the wall shook. What's going on for you right now? What are you feeling?
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful, and I love that you're a mother and you're passing on this legacy of literacy, of knowing oneself, of going deeper. That's beautiful. Um, how many children do you have?
I have one child. I have a son, a
So,
grown
right.
up son, and yeah.
Do you have these types of conversations with him? Do you still talk to him about spirituality or embodiment?
Oh, sometimes he's a grown up. He's in his mid.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But more not as his mom. I mean, our
Yeah.
relationship has really had to evolve a lot. I've
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
learn and unlearn. I've had to
Yeah.
unlearn
Yeah.
some of uh, the social expectations of what a mom should look like and act like
Mm,
and be like.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another aspect of life where I think that it's very easy
Yeah.
for people and for parents to say, okay, I'm the mom, and therefore this is how you, my child, should be relating to me
Right.
or talking to me. My son has 5 planets in Sagittarius, so I've had to question everything that I thought was sort of everything that was the cultural
Mm,
collective imprint about how to be a human being with in that relationship with him. Still being, I'm always going to be his mom, but
yeah.
how do I get beyond being the mom and
Mm,
see him as an individuated,
mm,
independent, separate soul who came in here with his own storyline, and
yeah.
I'm
Mm,
not the director of that.
right. Right. I love that message too. We need to hear that over and over again because, yeah, there's this is very strong attraction, desire, almost like instant um, ways of trying to control or play parts. That's what it is, roles, right, Luisa?
Right,
That's who I am, and just become fixed, static.
right.
And that's not what life is. I mean, life from that perspective of movement, that's always, yeah, the relationship you speak of this dance, this movement, and then also that which knows that this is all only an experience. It's just this beautiful happening. I love to say happening. I don't know why. I remember saying this is a dream, and then something in me kind of said, "Wait a minute, I should." It seems like a dream is a little bit too much because it's too, let's say, it's almost too real for the human self to understand, to comprehend that this is a dream. So I kind of changed now to happening. Why now? It's happening here now. It feels interesting. It's an interesting thing. So we're almost at the end, and I love the way you talk about the voiceless self, and to give expression to the voiceless self. We It's a good idea to find different ways of doing so. And you mentioned poetry, which you do, journaling, dream work, Jungian active imagination, of course, non-plant medicine also induced shamanic journeying. This is yeah, we think about shamanism. When I think about shamanism, of course, I think about psychedelics. I think about ayahuasca, but it doesn't have to be, right, Luisa? It doesn't have to be. We don't have to take ayahuasca.
Oh, we are fully biologically equipped to access so-called altered, non-ordinary states without any outside substance. I mean,
Right.
I think those things are right for certain people at certain times. That happens not to be my path because I also feel like if I can go into an expanded state of consciousness intentionally for 10 minutes
Yeah.
or for 20 minutes and then come back and be able to drive and to engage in a problem solving conversation with
Yeah.
someone, that so that's a whole topic. I have a whole teaching on that, but
Right.
yes, um, we are completely capable of
Mm.
accessing ecstatic states, any external substance.
Yeah, that's another powerful message to hear, because I think guess some of us want the quick fix or the shortcut to spiritual understanding. Is always spiritual depth, and then we go. It seems like it might be a good idea for some people, but perhaps not everyone, right?
Different paths, different spiritual assignments for different people.
Right.
There's room for all of it.
Yes, yeah, yes. And then I have a final question here for you. But before that, I would like to mention that you offer this unique model that you have developed titled somatic-shamanic-energy. That's one. You also mentioned earlier the embodied mystic. This is a 6-week course that you also offer through your website. And then I went on your website and I see that you have other interesting offerings honoring the ancestors. This is a complete pre-recorded ceremony that you offer to your followers and people who wanted to experiment and who are curious to know what that is about. You also have I'm right here with you guided meditation, introduction to shamanic journey audio course, and then you have drums, rattles, and more with Luisa Kolker. I mean, I love these offers. I love everything that has to do with going deeper. That's really the truth. Anything. Although I do enjoy the ordinary human experience of just having this conversation here and kind of laughing and doing this for the sake of sharing the message and just having these meaningful connections. But I, I can't help it but absolutely love and have this deep appreciation for going deeper. That's it always goes back to me. Like it seems like it is that soul's journey. So this is the time, and I feel like this is the lifetime. I would love to go deeper. Although I also feel that this not the moment because I could go deeper. But and then I'm very patient, and I try to go back to trust again. That's okay for now to be what it is. And would you like to add anything that you left unsaid, Luisa, for today's conversation?
What I'd like to say is it's been really a pleasure speaking with you, Valeria.
Yeah, I feel the same
And
way.
that, yes, and that to me, ultimately, um, the greatest joy is for there not to be these delineations or segregation
Mm,
between spiritual, ecstatic soul
mm,
states and our just everyday here sharing
yeah.
with each other. That that is my idea of emotional freedom, is that
Mm,
there's not separate compartments, that it is all a delicious flow and wholeness. So that's
yes.
what I would end with. Yeah.
I know, and I love that too. I was about to ask you, do you have one message? But this is the message. That's a beautiful message, right?
There you go. That's it.
Embracing it all as wholeness, right? And before I ask you a technical question, I want to thank you again for what you do, for being open to life, for being so generous to offer what you do offer your work, your time, your energy to heal yourself and others, to uncover that depth of the wholeness that you speak of. So thank you so much, Luisa.
Thank you.
And my technical question is, where can we find more information about you? What is the best way to find all this good stuff about going deeper to ourselves?
The best way is to go to my website, which is luisakolker.com. LuisaKolker.com.
Wonderful. And I'll have the link on your podcast profile. Is there any other place, social media, YouTube, Facebook? Are you on?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as the Embodied Mystic. And I have my personal Facebook page, which I'm not on a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm on there. And I also do have a private Facebook group that
Yeah.
you have to request permission to join, because there are certain guidelines that you need to follow. And that one is called Shamanic Soul Circle with Luisa Kolker.
Ah, wonderful. That's good to know. I'll have those links too on your podcast profile, the video profile. Thank you so much again for your presence, Luisa. Bye for now.
Valeria, thank you.